Shall we set up?
Yes, I'm going to retweet.
Okay.
So I'm going to do that, but let's set up.
Just give, yeah, well, just let me know.
Oh, really? Interestingly enough. Should I just set it down? Yes. Once this is set up. Yeah, when you're ready. It's also on
forward, just so that we have got one that it is a more immediate shot. It's mine to be a wide shot. This one it isn't much different. I don't mean much forward, but just over here. As if he moves that frame. So what's the range there? We can ask us to, because he's got to stay fairly close to that anyway. He's going to stay pretty damn close. So I'm just saying, if our photo camera only little part, not much different. So I'm just suggesting your camera moves a bit forward, even more than this. I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
As soon as you guys are ready.
Okay, we're almost ready.
Almost. 30. All right with that?
Yeah.
So can this move forward here without it getting in your way? So both of them.
I mean, if they're...
Oh, you can zoom in. Okay, so I never do that.
I also have a small child.
Yeah, that's totally fine. 4-year-old.
Oh, that's fine then. No, that's fine. So if you
Yeah.
invite me then, that's fine. You need a minute to position.
See, now that I don't. Like me. Which sounds like synthesis, but it is. No, it is. Yeah. I still struggle with the late nights.
I didn't receive the invitations. Oh,
Yeah, we're just waiting for the YouTubery. We're just connecting to YouTube, so we'll be about. Well, I was told 30 seconds. Oh no, we are go. Harmit, are you supposed to be on the floor?
yes, I'm supposed to know.
Fine, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Roma, I'm director here at Free Word. You're all extremely welcome here this evening for Dystopian Dreamscapes and Real Life Nightmares, which sounds like a good way to spend any evening. We are super happy this evening to be presenting this event in partnership with Privacy International. We are going to be journeying through some of the finest dystopian films and books of our time with Gus Hosein from Privacy International. And we'll be asking a bit about how these films compare to our present and what clues they give about our future. The event is actually kind of coming at the tail end of a whole series called This Is Private, which has been a season exploring our public lives and private fears from a whole range of perspectives. It's been the first in one of Freeword's new topical seasons, which are going to be exploring urgent issues of our times over the coming months and years. As a venue, we focus on the power and politics of words, and over the past few months, we've had some really amazing writers, artists, and activists under this roof addressing that particular topic of privacy. So please keep an eye on what's coming up as well. We've still got 2 events in the series to go. There are leaflets outside if you haven't got them on your chairs. One is going to be a writer's room with some of the finest emerging spoken word artists of London, and the other is called Britain's Private Shame, where we're going to have the rapper Low Key and the intellectual David Goodhart exploring together, and I think probably having a bit of a face-off about some of the consequences of colonialism. Before I introduce Gus, I know it's going to be an interesting one. Book your tickets. I've got the joy of doing some housekeeping for you. There are lots of loos in this building. If you want to use them, please feel free. You can either go up the steps at the back. There are some around the side to the front, and there are more out the back there. They're well signposted, but just follow the signs. We haven't, unsurprisingly, planned any fire alarms for this evening. So if there is a fire alarm, then we will all need to go out. Follow the Freeword team, who will be wearing lanyards. They'll show you where to go. Don't use lifts. I can't imagine why you would, but don't. And you'll have to go round the front, out to the left, and back again. And don't come back in again unless someone tells you to. I don't think that's going to happen. We are live on YouTube, and Rebecca's going to be filming. We're also going to be taking photographs. If you don't want to be featured in those, they're not going to be close-up shots or anything, but if you don't want to be in that film, please make yourself known, and we'll make sure that you're not in those bits of recording. And also, I think Gus is going to mention this at the end, but Freeword is trialling a new evaluation bot, which is a slightly odd thing, but we're trying to find more fun ways of finding out what you think about the events that we put on. We would really value it if you would provide feedback to it. It's via a text message. It's supposed to have a sense of humour. You can tell us if it does. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Privacy International's Gus Hosein. His CV is insane, and I'll take you through a little bit of it in a second. But before I do, for me this is super exciting to have Gus in the building, because when we started talking about doing a series on privacy, his was the name that kept coming up as the expert on the subject. So it's absolutely awesome to have you here. The reason that Gus is an expert on the subject is this. Gus, I believe that you'd have a drink, but Gus has worked at the intersection of technology and human rights for over 20 years. He developed national, regional and global campaigns on communications privacy. He's worked on national security and anti-terrorism policy. He's led global advocacy against border registration, biometric collection, tracking of migration, travel profiling, and mass surveillance of financial data flows. He's led research and co-authored a book on identity systems and policy called Global Challenges for Identity Policy. He's founded regional and global networks of civil society organisations to work on technology and rights. He's acted as an external evaluator for UNHCR. He's advised the UN Special Rapporteur on terrorism and human rights, and he's advised on a number of other international organisations. He's also a fellow of the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufacture and Commerce. I think that sort of says it all. What it doesn't say is that we're about to have a really fascinating evening. I think we've seen some of the slides, and I think it's going to be a really great evening. So Gus, thank you for being with us, and over to you.
I know speakers always start with the thank you for having me here, but this is a presentation I've wanted to give for years. I love this topic, but nobody's ever let me give this presentation. Even last week I was having a fight with my 5-year-old son where I wanted to talk to him about these things, and his way of seeking revenge on me for interrupting him was to say that Star Wars wasn't real. Don't do that to me. Yeah, I love dystopia. I love dystopian fiction because it gives us an insight into the direction of the world we have, but also into ourselves. And so there are 3 aspects to dystopias that I think are the reasons why we are also fascinated by them. And the first one I'll discuss now in greater length, because it won't be one that I come back to, but the other two I'll get to more as we go through. The first reason we love dystopias, and you come to a talk like this, is because it's the social imaginary. When people are struggling to articulate their opposition to something, but they have a radical opposition, they would say something like, oh, that's so Orwellian. Because it's a short note to say that this is a terrible thing and will lead to a very dark future. And that's why after, say, 9/11, there was so much talk of, oh, this is so 1984, this is so Big Brother, and there's countless op-eds written about how Tony Blair saw 1984 as a instruction manual and not a piece of fiction. And we see that again with Trump. It's not to dismiss it, but it's just a way that helps people articulate. Because if they were to say that, you know, Trump coming to power will lead to jackboots on the streets and people being rounded up and put into prison, nobody would believe you. But if you said this is hearkening the world of 1984, it's just you sound a lot less radical. So that's the first reason we like dystopias. But the second is that particularly future-facing dystopias allow us to have a conversation about what does the future of autonomy look like? What does the future of freedom look like? And how are we planting the seeds of a dark world for those very valued and cherished things going forward? And again, it bleeds into the idea of a social imaginary, so you can tap into people's interests. And I'll come back to that one. But the third and deepest reason we all get a lot of dystopias is that it allows us to think about technology and what is technology doing to not just our world, but what it is to be human. And what is it doing to the human condition and humanity as a concept. And to pick up on that with the darkest possible dystopian image of the future as to start the whole talk off, it has to be this one. All that technological change, flying cars, cities in the sky, but the Jetsons are still a 1950s family. That is terrifying to me that the future shall revert to the 1950s. But actually, to many people, that is what they would like to see. And that's a recurring theme I'll come back to in a bit. But it's this reflection around the technology has transformed the way we travel, the way we live, and you would think it would transform the way we conduct ourselves, the way we interact with one another, the way we nurture one another. And of course, it also influences the way that power is exhibited. And that's when we get into works like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. How many people have read Brave New World? You mostly have. Just for those who haven't, it's amazing. It actually takes place in this neighborhood. Aldous Huxley and George Orwell used to hang out together back in the late 1930s and early 1940s, and they were all around BBC Broadcasting House at the LSE and Aldwych around there. And so parts of these stories, whether it's 1984 or Brave New World, take place in this neighborhood. But Huxley was trying to imagine a class-based world built on genetics. And people are genetically engineered in certain ways to be high-skilled, and for the lower class in society, everybody's a test tube. You're basically manufactured in labs, but they intentionally dumb down the people who are the lower class, the epsilons. Like they interrupt the formation of their brain to create a new slave class. To clean the streets, because somebody's got to clean the streets. And this beautiful society they've built is all enabled with drugs to make people feel happy. And yet there are some people who rebel against this structured society, and they live on these reservations, and they're called savages. And the whole story is just about what kind of world do we create when we have these types of technologies permeating our lives and structuring power. So here's
let me ask
the
you
interview
this.
with...
You're talking about a world that could take place within the confines of a totalitarian state. Let's become more immediate, more urgent about it. We believe, anyway, that we live in a democracy here in the United States. Do you believe that this brave new world that you talk about could, let's say in the next quarter century, the next century, could come here to our shores?
I think it could. I mean, that's why I feel it's so extremely important here and now to start thinking about these problems, not to let ourselves be taken by surprise by the new advances in technology. I mean, for example, in regard to the use of the drugs, we know there's enough evidence now for us to be able, on the basis of this evidence and using a certain amount of creative imagination, to foresee the kind of uses which could be made by people of bad will with these things, and to attempt to forestall this. And in the same way, I think with these other methods of propaganda, we can foresee and we can do a good deal to forestall. I mean, after all, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
So to foresee and to forestall the types of innovations that will create problematic dynamics in our societies. And in his book, a large element of it was the manufacturing of happiness and drug-addled happiness. And so it's interesting to see that we're working really hard on that. This is an article that there are brain-altering wearables that allow users to change their moods on demand. So you can imagine today this is an incredibly empowering thing for an individual. But if you imagine the use of this technology to structure society, it will have very different ramifications. Or this example, this one drove me nuts. This is from 2014. Some researchers at Princeton worked with Facebook on a study on Facebook users without telling Facebook users. And the study was to understand if there's a concept of emotion contagion. That is, if your Facebook feed for a period of time only presented you with bad news, only like not like births and marriages news, but just like the deaths and destruction news, would that make you sad? And would you share that sadness? And this was a real experiment they did on thousands of Facebook users without telling them. And this is what Facebook was doing in 2014. It took them a year to say, you know what, okay, maybe we're a little sorry for that. But they haven't stopped doing that kind of messing around with people without even telling them. Incredibly powerful organization doing incredibly dangerous things. And then, of course, you have Charlie Brooker who comes along and helps us understand these things. And I'm limiting the number of uses of this show just because there are just so many examples, but this is one of my favorites.
And that's one brush sweep. You want a cookie with that? On the house.
Sounds awesome. See you tomorrow, JJ.
See you, Lacey.
Oh, saw your boy in the fire hat just now. So cute.
Yeah, he's really something.
I actually can't watch too much Black Mirror. It just drives you nuts. Because it really isn't just talking about technology. It's talking about the human condition and how we can shape the human condition. It also it shows the darkest sides of us. And the fact that we often can't even have a bad day. Here's a continuation of that episode.
Hi there, how are you doing?
I am wonderful.
I am so sorry. That flight is canceled.
No.
Customer incident at the other end.
What? So when is the next flight?
Yeah, they're all kind of full.
I booked this weeks ago. It's my best friend's wedding.
I'm sorry.
I have to get there. I have to.
Okay, let's see what we can do.
Oh, thank you.
I see there's one standby seat on another plane leaving tonight. That's reserved for members of our Prime Flight program. You got to be a 4.2 or over to qualify.
Oh, I'm a 4.2.
I'm afraid you're actually a 4.183.
well, that's not my fault. Some woman dinged me down in the couch. Can't you
I'm
just...
sorry, it won't let me book it without the correct ranking.
But it's so close.
There's just nothing I can do.
Christ, I mean, surely.
I'm gonna have to ask you to moderate your language then.
Sorry, it's just... I'm maid of honor. I cannot miss this wedding.
And I am so sorry about that.
Can you call the supervisor?
I cannot do that.
Can you just call the supervisor?
I cannot do that.
Call the fucking supervisor.
Okay, that's profanity. Was there a tolerance on profanity?
I'm sorry, it's just...
Yeah, I have to serve the next customer.
No,
Step away, ma'am.
God, just fucking help me!
I've called security.
Oh, no, please don't do that. I'm a 5-starring you. 5 stars.
What's the issue here, Hannah?
Intimidation and profanity.
Oh, no, I was not
Don't
intimidating.
speak, ma'am.
I was just trying to...
Okay, so, in order to restore calm, I'm invoking my authority as airport security to dock you 1 full ranking point as a punitive measure. This is a temporary measure.
No!
The score reverts to normal in 24 hours.
No, but I need it now.
Period. All down votes are subject to a ×2 multiplier.
×2?
We recommend you avoid negative feedback at this time.
I'm on double damage?
Please, remove yourself from the airport immediately.
Okay, well, due to your ranking.
Okay, so having said all of that, I've been instructed to show you this at some point in the presentation for some feedback about how everything's going. No profanity, please. But yeah, if you want to take a photo and feedback, that's fine. There'll be this slide again later. But this enforced society where you cannot show your emotions, or the only emotion you can show is happiness, is again what was the undercurrent in Brave New World. And here's a conversation between 2 of the major characters in Brave New World. Mustafa, who essentially built that Brave New World, and the savage, the person who doesn't want to be a part of this happiness-based society. And they're having this conversation about, well, the Brave New World doesn't have so much of the beautiful things that we would call beautiful. But equally, that Brave New World would consider the things that we would call beautiful to be gross. Whether it's art, whether it's God, poetry, danger. And then if you want to relish in the world that we have versus the world that can be built, you have the right to grow old and ugly and impotent, the right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. And the savage said, I want that. I don't want your society that's this perfect society where there's no autonomy, there's nothing but happiness and drugs. And that's a nice segue to this movie. Every time I watch a clip of this movie, I just get more and more
I just don't understand
about
feeling sick the way I did. I never used to feel sick before. I used to feel like the very opposite. I mean, doing it or watching it, I used to feel real horror show.
You felt ill this afternoon because you're getting better. You see, when we're healthy, we respond to the presence of the hateful with fear and nausea. You're becoming healthy, that's all. By this time tomorrow, you'll be healthier still.
Truly done my best, morning and afternoon, to play it their way. and sit like a horror show cooperative malchick in the chair of torture while they flashed nasty bits of ultra-violence on the screen. Though not on the soundtrack, my brothers, the only sound being music. Then I noticed, in all my pain and sickness, what music it was that, like, cracked and boomed. It was Ludwig van. Ninth Symphony, Fourth Movement.
I can't do it anymore. But the whole point is that this is psychological conditioning techniques. The whole idea that we will treat you for your erratic, violent behavior and we will normalize you through treatment. And it's no surprise that, well, that's actually going on already. How network neuroscience is creating a new era of mind control. Whether it's Facebook suddenly nudging you towards being sad, or neuroscience getting into the business of mind control, we're not too far away from being able to re-engineer society. Deal with unhappiness, deal with people who don't fit in, and make sure that they conform in ways that we can actually design. Now, just for a slight shift, can anybody mention which movie this one is?
Total Recall. Oh, it's Total Recall.
Yeah, it is Total Recall. But it's interesting because I really wanted to cover Running Man. He's the second bodybuilder to become governor. The first bodybuilder to become governor of Minnesota was Jesse the Body Ventura, who was in Running Man. And what was interesting about what's interesting about Total Recall is that you can erase people's minds or create new memories, which is just a fascinating screwing around with what it is to be human. But Running Man, for those of you who don't know the premise of the movie, it's essentially built off the idea that rather than punish crime through prisons, we put people on reality TV shows where they can be killed unless they compete in a gladiatorial contest. And the hero of the movie is Governor Schwarzenegger, where he's actually a policeman who tries to save people from being attacked by the police, but then they doctored the evidence to make it look like he killed all these protesters. So they put him on this show where he has to fight for his life, and lo and behold, the show, being a reality TV show, is an incredibly powerful institution. It essentially runs the planet, and the communications network can influence everybody around the world. So if you can hack all of that, then everything works out just happily ever after in the end. And yeah, nothing like what we have today at all. But and then what was interesting about these types of movies, and I think we all start to enjoy asking the question, how did these societies end up like this? How did we end up in a world where instead of putting people into prison, we just put them into these gladiatorial contests? Or what kind of market led to the idea that we can create and fabricate memories for ourselves? And one of the more recent versions of that origin story is actually in the trailer for what was mandatory reading for me when I was growing up in Canada. Like, everybody had to read Margaret Atwood. And the trailer for the TV show captures so many of these dynamics.
I was asleep before. That's how we let it happen. When they slaughtered Congress, we didn't wake up. When they blamed terrorists and suspended the Constitution, we didn't wake up then either. Now I'm awake. My name is Offred. I had another name.
Ladies, I have to let you go. It's the law now.
They needed to do it this way. All the bank accounts and the jobs all at the same time. Can you imagine the airports otherwise?
You girls will serve the leaders and their barren wives. You will bear children for them.
There's an eye in your house. We'll send you to the colonies. You'll be cleaning up toxic waste and then you'll die.
Tonight is a celebration of Gilead and of what we have achieved.
We only wanted to make the world better.
Better.
Better never means better for everyone.
I want to keep on living for her.
Remember your scripture. Blessed are the meek.
And blessed are those who suffer for the cause of righteousness.
It was actually my colleague Eva, who's in the audience tonight. She's the one who recommended we include this one. And she wanted to know two things. First of all, there's, Margaret Atwood's releasing a sequel to her book. When is it, next year?
It's September 2019.
September 2019. So I'd hate to see the modernization, if there is modernization on that. And second, we, and Eva particularly, just launched today at PI a feminist privacy manifesto. And Eva wanted this to be included in this montage because never in history have we had more data on women's bodies. Whether it's through an app on your phone to monitor periods, or just generally your conduct in daily life is now monitored and scored and profiled. And what for? And what will it lead to? And that's why, again, I love this because the series one doesn't focus too much on the fall of society, but it is interesting to imagine what enabled that. It was the ability of access to data, perhaps, or we've already seen some of that. This is an article about how a Boston company, a Boston advertising company, ad tech, that helped basically target ads at people, were offering the capability to target ads at women at abortion centers. And so anti-choice groups were using that capability to target women at abortion centers. Now, that's where the data allows this to happen. The systems allow this to happen. They actually promote this type of targeting. The darkening of a world can lead to much worse than that. And this is using advertising technology. But on this theme of the fall of societies, one of the best pieces of writing about the despair about how a society can fall from a utopia to a dystopia and what we should do about it is Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. This is actually now being made into a series by Apple's new TV program, TV station or video station, or their own version of Netflix. And in this series, there's one guy who can foresee the fact that this great order that's been created in the distant future is about to fall. And he takes it as his mission to make sure that the fall is over as quickly as possible and they rebuild. So instead of falling into 100,000 years of human despair and ruin, he can manufacture and he can manipulate society and understand society and predict the future well enough that he can minimize the damage of the fall and get society, global or universal society, to recover in less than 1,000 years. So he takes it upon himself to gather all the data, to get all the insight, and to create a new psychohistory, a social science to predict the future. And then he's able to predict the future and say, okay, if we do this, we manipulate that, we just make sure this doesn't happen, then the ruin shall not be so bad. But then he gets into these deep questions of who's controlling society? If there is this individual and this movement called the Foundation, who are here to make sure that our society is kept happy, it doesn't fall into too great a ruin, have you taken away freedom and autonomy? Do people even know who's in control anymore? If they're not in control, who's actually keeping all this thing going? And it leads these fascinating discussions, again, about the future of humanity and the nature of humanity. The quest for prediction is the constant theme also in science fiction and dystopias. And this is from a movie from the late 1990s, early 2000s called Minority Report with Tom Cruise. And this movie was one of those movies that came out just at the right time. So many of the issues that we were dealing with, I was working with the ACLU at the time, American Civil Liberties Union, where there were a lot of court cases going on about the nature of government power and what technology does to, say, search and seizure. And this movie comes out and just starts nailing some of them in wonderful ways. But this specific clip
when the precogs declare a victim
prediction.
and killer, their name is embedded in the grain of wood. Since each piece is unique, the shape and grain is unique. The shape and grain is impossible to forge.
I'm sure you all understand the legalistic drawback to pre-crime methodology.
Here we go again.
Look, I'm not with the ACLU on this, Jeff.
Well, let's not kid ourselves. We are arresting individuals who have broken no law.
But they will. The commission of the crime itself is absolute metaphysics. The precogs see the future, and they're never wrong.
Yeah, but it's not the future if you stop. Isn't that a fundamental paradox?
Yes, it is. You're talking about predetermination, which happens all the time. Why'd you catch that?
Because it was going to fall.
You're certain?
Yeah.
But it didn't fall. You caught it. The fact that you prevented it from happening doesn't change the fact that it was going to happen.
You ever get any false positives? Someone intends to kill his boss or his wife, but they never go through with it. How do the precogs tell the difference?
Precogs don't see what you intend to do. Only what you will do.
Then why can't they see rapes? Or assaults or suicides?
Because of the nature of murder. There's nothing more destructive to the metaphysical fabric that binds us than the untimely murder of one human being by another.
Somehow I don't think that was Walt Whitman.
It's our Cinnamon. She developed precogs, designed the system, and pioneered the interface.
Speaking of interfacing, I'd love to say hello.
We have an obsession with prediction because we have an obsession with an idea of that ball going around. It's something we can see beginning and we know what's going to happen next. We have an obsession with causality. And we're frustrated in modern society that we can no longer say this leads to that. And so the fact that science fiction, fiction generally, loves prediction is because it introduces a simple narrative. Although Minority Report came along and made a royal mess of it in a great way, actually. But it's no surprise that there are many companies and governments out there who want prediction capability. This is a website with a cookie notice as well of a company called the Predictive Policing Company, or Predpol. They're an offshoot of basically police officers in the west on the west coast of the United States who said, you know, with enough data, we can predict where criminality will arise. And so they want to amass vast amounts of data, run some algorithms on it, but not tell you what those algorithms are, and then say to the police, you shall go there. You shall go there because you shall find crime. And it's a compelling argument. It's highly problematic and statistically insanely stupid, but it's a highly compelling argument, and it's been deployed in this country. So it's been used in Kent, according to this article from Kent Online, and it's been used by the Greater Manchester Police since 2013. And so the idea that our police would be very happy to hand their data to a private company, for that private company to tell them how to do their jobs because it predicts something bad might happen. It's what we all want. We all want that level of predictability in our lives. So we shouldn't malign the police for wanting that. It's stupid to begin with, but it's unethical because this business of prediction is taking off across society. Unfortunately, you can't see the slide too well. At PI, we've been accumulating all these stories of, well, dystopia, essentially. And we have a database on our site at privacyinternational.org/examples, where we itemize all these different types of dynamics, whether it's like behavioral targeting or predictive policing. And if you go to our site and actually can see these stories, it outlines how predictive policing has been deployed in LA County, in New Orleans, at border entry points. Employers have started using predictions in order to decide whether or not to even review a CV. And of course, credit companies are doing this. And there is also the idea that the Chinese government is looking into social credit monitoring to predict whether or not somebody is a good human being or not. But for a moment, let's just change gears and deal with what most people think about when they think about science fiction and dystopia. They think about the rise of robots. And there are three key movies about the rise of the robot. And although the first one is not the same type of dystopia that we've been discussing, it's always worth going to Blade Runner.
Do you mind if I smoke?
It won't affect the test. All right, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Just relax and answer them as simply as you can. It's your birthday. Someone gives you a calfskin wallet.
I wouldn't accept it. Also, I'd report the person who gave it to me to the police.
You've got a little boy. He shows you his butterfly collection, plus the killing jar.
I take him to the doctor.
You're watching television. Suddenly you realize there's a wasp crawling on your arm.
I'd kill it.
You're reading a magazine. You come across a full-page nude photo of a girl.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr. Deckard?
Just answer the questions, please. You show it to your husband. He likes it so much he hangs it on your bedroom wall.
I wouldn't let him.
Why not?
I should be enough for him.
One more question. You're watching a stage play. A banquet is in progress. The guests are enjoying an appetizer of raw oysters. The entree consists of boiled duck.
Would you step out for a few moments, Rachel? Thank you.
She's a replicant, isn't she?
I'm impressed. How many questions does it usually take to spot?
I don't get it, Tyrell.
How many questions?
20, 30 cross-referenced.
It took more than 100 for Rachel, didn't it?
She doesn't know.
She's beginning to suspect, I think.
Suspect? How can it not know what it is?
This imagines an incredible future where robots have evolved so much that they don't even know that they're robots, and we can't necessarily identify them. And because they've been treated as a servant class, they want to rebel, and they want more. And their lives are kept artificially finite, and they want to demand that their lives are longer. It's an incredibly dark, beautiful world made by Ridley Scott, and it's, if you ask people who grew up watching this in the 1980s, and you ask them what does the future look like, it's the mood from this movie that they talked about. But what I love about that scene is that it's an adaptation of the Turing test. This is a test that Alan Turing, a computer scientist and mathematician from this country, back in the 1940s came up with, which was the ability to, one day we'll be able to create a computer that's so good that when asking it questions, we will not know it's a computer. And so that's an adaptation of the Turing test to show it in Hollywood glamour. But I don't know if you heard, a few months ago, Google's announced a product that instead of having call centers interact with you, there will be a bot who will speak with you, and their goal is that you will not be able to identify that it's not a human being. So we are intentionally building a world like this. And, well, there are a number of reasons why we're building a world like that. And that's when we get to this one.
Good question. Okay. Why did you give her sexuality? An AI doesn't need a gender. She could have been a gray box.
Actually, I don't think that's true. Can you give an example of consciousness at any level, human or animal, that exists without a sexual dimension?
They have sexuality as an evolutionary reproductive need.
What imperative does a gray box have to interact with another gray box? Can consciousness exist without interaction? Anyway, sexuality is fun, man. If you're going to exist, why not enjoy it? What, you want to remove the chance of her falling in love and fucking?
And in answer to your real question, you bet she can fuck.
What?
In between her legs, there's an opening with a concentration of sensors. You engage them in the right way, it creates a pleasure response.
So, if you wanted to screw her, mechanically speaking, you could, and she'd enjoy it.
That wasn't my real question.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
My real question was, did you give her sexuality as a diversion tactic?
I don't follow.
Like a stage magician with a hot assistant.
So a hot robot who clouds your ability to judge your AI?
Exactly. So, Did you program her to flirt with me?
If I did, would that be cheating?
Wouldn't it?
Caleb, what's your type?
Of girl?
No, of salad dressing. Yeah, of girl. What's your type of girl? You know what? Don't even answer that. Let's say it's black chicks. Okay? That's your thing. For the sake of argument, that's your thing. Okay? Why is that your thing? Because you did a detailed analysis of all racial types and you cross-referenced that analysis with a points-based system? No! You're just attracted to black chicks. A consequence of accumulated external stimuli that you probably didn't even register as they registered with you.
Did you program her to like me or not?
I programmed her to be heterosexual, just like you were programmed to be heterosexual.
Nobody programmed me to be straight.
You decided to be straight? Please, of course you were programmed. By nature or nurture or both. And to be honest, Caleb, you're starting to annoy me now because this is your insecurity talking. This is not your intellect. Come with me.
So that conversation is as much about the Constitution of free will, whether it's a human thing or it could be designed and programmed into a machine. But it's also about humanity and sexuality. And unfortunately, we know the direction that humanity will likely take on something like that.
In this nondescript building, I have an appointment with Harmony, the world's first sex robot who, without her wig, bears a striking resemblance to the robot in Ex Machina.
I am already taking over the world, one bedroom at a time.
She'll be available later this year for about $20,000.
I think she's sleeping. Oh! Hi.
Hi, baby. 10 minutes without you seems like an eternity.
Well, thank you. I've missed you too.
Now, there are people who are arguing that this is a good development. The reason I raise it here is a few points. First, that opening scene of this cut was like, it's almost like how science fiction was shaping how this would look. So that's the role dystopias play in our actual innovations going on, if you want to call that innovation. And second, proponents of this technology say that this is actually good because it will do things like reduce sexually transmitted infections. It will, I can't even imagine the full litany of excuses they have for this technology. And there's so many reasons to not like this technology, but the one I want to pick up on is that what does it do to us if we use and celebrate this kind of technology? I'm not just saying, what does it mean for that robot who might be a replicant, who might be a Pinocchio that needs to be treated a certain way and a certain dignity, because that's a fascinating discussion to have as well. But if we are cruel to a thing, what does that do to our psychology? What does that do to how we view a thing that might not be a thing, that might be a Pinocchio, that might be a human being? I don't think our brains are ready to process what it does to us. One of the other movies when it comes to AI is, of course, 2001. I don't know if this is a classic movie from the 1960s. And it's often associated with being a story about a computer called HAL on a spaceship called the Discovery that's traveling to Jupiter, that starts killing off all the astronauts on board. And it's taken as a story of that this machine is taking over the ship and killing everybody. It's AI gone mad. And what's interesting is that the author of the book, when he came up with the name HAL for the computer, it's H-A-L, that's just the previous letter in the alphabet from IBM. And so people think that he was trying to talk about a future where AI is dictating and essentially killing people off.
I read you. Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal?
Dave, although you took very thorough precautions in the pod against my hearing you, I could see your lips move.
And so the point of this clip was like, oh, the machine's always watching you. The machine will not let you rise up against it. But what was more interesting about this, apart from that narrative, is also that it only came out in the next movie in 2010 that tried to explain that Hal is actually a hero of the story. And the reason Hal did what he did by killing off all the astronauts was because his political masters taught him to lie. And he's a computer with artificial intelligence. He does things like take care of a ship. And they told him to lie to the crew. And that was what essentially caused him to go crazy and start killing off characters. And this is something we have to think about when it comes to artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, and when you go back to the policing example I was giving, the reason why it's insane to do artificial intelligence on top of policing is that policing data is not a representative sample of society. Policing data is data on crimes that the police have prosecuted or investigated. And so if it says, go to the corner of this street on Friday nights at 7 p.m., you'll find drugs there, the computer will say, okay, that means I will tell the police next Friday to go to that corner and find drugs there. It's not exactly rocket science, but if you train the computer with problematic data, it will learn problematic things and create problematic functions in society, such as killing all the crews, or discriminatory policing embedded into a computer system that we can never question. But I digress. One of the other types of, one of the classic pictures of artificial intelligence is, of course, Terminator. This is Terminator 2. I don't know if you recall Terminator 1. That's when, again, the governor of California, or ex-governor of California, showed up from the future to hunt down this woman, Sarah Connor. And the way that he hunted her down, because she was about to give birth to the leader of the human revolution against the robot Dominion, to hunt her down, he had to identify her first. And so when he landed in LA, in 1983 LA, the first thing he did, other than put on clothes, because you can't travel back in time with clothes apparently, he went to a phone booth, opened up a telephone book, and went to Connor, and looked for Connor S, and went to every address with Connor S, and killed whoever was there. And she was the last one, and she got away, and there was a happy ending to that movie. But this is the second movie, where they get to learn, again, about the descent, the fall, what
I need
led.
to know how Skynet gets built. Who's responsible?
The man most directly responsible is Miles Bennett Dyson.
Who is that?
He's the director of special projects at Cyberdyne Systems Corporation.
Why him?
In a few months, he creates a revolutionary type of microprocessor.
Go on. Then what?
In 3 years, Cyberdyne will become the largest supplier of military computer systems. All stealth bombers are upgraded with Cyberdyne computers, becoming fully unmanned. Afterwards, they fly with a perfect operational record. The Skynet funding bill is passed. The system goes online on August 4, 1997. Human decisions are removed from strategic defense. Skynet begins to learn at a geometric rate. It becomes self-aware at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Time, August 29th. In a panic, they try to pull the plug.
Skynet fights back.
Yes, it launches its missiles against the targets in Russia.
Why attack Russia? Aren't they our friends now?
Because Skynet knows that the Russian counterattack will eliminate its enemies over here.
Jesus.
So it's the language of self-aware, trying to unplug the machine and you can't, and Russia being our friends. It's just interesting messages. And what's insane is that GCHQ, the intelligence agency in this country, one of its programs, they actually stupidly called Skynet. It's like, why would you do something like that? Maybe they're fans, or I don't know. And then the third movie that relates to this AI robotic takeover is, of course, The Matrix.
This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today. Welcome to the desert of the real. What is the Matrix? Control. The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world, built to keep us under control in order to change a human being into
essentially a battery, a power source. Now, this is the first movie, and everybody loved the first movie. And then number 2 and number 3 came out, and it became very much aligned. But I recently saw an analysis of movies 2 and 3 that said, apart from the strange plot holes, it's actually a fascinating philosophical discussion about what is the nature of free will. And what is the nature of, like, how can you design free will into a society that is going to have robots and artificial intelligence and computer programming making decisions about us and our free will? I wouldn't say go back and waste your time on all those movies again, but it's worth asking, not just, oh my God, robots will destroy this planet, but instead also ask, what does it mean to be human when we're handing over decision making and happily handing over decision making to automation? And again, science fiction and dystopia seem to be guiding decision makers. This is NATO talking about an autonomous military drone. The idea that, you know, it's no longer science fiction. We can now have autonomous killing machines, and we are in a rush. We're in a race to design these because, well, if the Americans don't do it, the Chinese will do it. And if the Chinese don't do it, the Russians will do it. And so everybody's in this huge rush to essentially build Skynet. And they're aware of the irony of all these things. For example, this is a Pentagon spending program where they want to spend $2 billion on AI-infused weapons for a program that they call the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure. JEDI. It's like they're mixing their metaphors here. But they don't get that, or maybe they do, unless, you know, they're really talking about destroying an entire planet with a single gun. They're trying to get big tech companies to buy into this and saying it's a patriotic thing to do. If we don't do this, the Chinese shall, so the Americans and patriotic American companies have to compete to join in on this. You might have heard some of the furore around Google and other companies and their employees getting angry about the idea of bidding for Pentagon contracts. But again, I'm not talking about the end of the world as a result of this. I'm talking about instead what happens when we take away the cost of warfare. There's no human cost to warfare. That if it's just machines we're sending into a battlefield, does that mean we're going to do it more often? And does it mean that we as decision makers to say, yes, we shall embark in war? We've taken the humanity out of engaging in war. Are we ready as a species to contemplate what that means? To take a slightly lighter mind on this, if we have autonomous capabilities, who will they target? And this is from the wonderful movie, also from 1984, Brazil.
Father, Christmas can't come if we haven't got a chimney.
You'll see.
me under Section 47, Paragraph 7 of Council Order number 438476 that Mr. Buttle, Archibald, residing at 412 North Tower, Shangri-La Towers, has been invited to assist the Ministry of Information with certain inquiries, and that he is liable to certain financial obligations as specified in Council Order RB/CZ/907/X. Sign here, please. There. Thank you. Same again, please. What's that? Press harder this time. Good.
Oh, this is so wrong.
That is your receipt for your husband. Thank you. And this is my receipt for your receipt.
Mrs. Buttle, are you okay?
We're Department of Works! Department of Works up here! Careful with those bloody things!
You take any medicine,
Don't touch me. Why don't you just get the hell out of here?
Don't you worry, love. We'll have everything shipshape in a jiffy. Nothing to worry about. Right, it's Tuttle downstairs who can worry, eh?
Tuttle? His name's Buttle. There must be some mistake.
Mistake? We don't make mistakes. Bloody typical. They've gone back to metric without telling us.
And so that's the premise of the movie, that the wrong person got arrested, because in literally the opening scene of the movie, there's it's a teletypewriter that's coming up with a list of arrest warrants, and a bug flies onto the paper and accidentally results in Tuttle being typed instead of Buttle, and the wrong guy gets taken away. And Robert De Niro ends up being a hero of the movie in a really strange way. It's definitely worth checking out. But while we're on to very odd issues of surveillance, this is another vision of the future, again from Minority Report, where they imagine a future where your eyes are your identity. And doing a search, this involves sending robots into buildings to find people. And he's hiding in water to conceal his heat, because they have heat sensing technology as well. To identify people.
Keep them away from me.
So he's trying to hide from the robots.
Wait a minute, the big cat's back. What do you guys think? A drunk maybe can't wake up?
Yeah, some guy who doesn't want to get red. Folks, please, be quiet. Close your doors, go back inside.
For our hero, he knew that the world that they created relied on biometrics, and there was a commercial imperative for that. And here's another scene.
A road diverges in the desert. Lexus. The road you're on, John Anderton, is the one less traveled. Make sure you're not on
Good evening, John Anderton.
John Anderton.
Gourmet cuisine.
Escape from it all, Harrison. Just get away, John Anderton. Forget your feelings.
So later in the movie, he gets new eyes.
Hello, Mr. Yakamoto. Welcome back to the Gap. How does assorted tank tops work out for you?
Mr. Yakamoto.
Hey, Miss Balfour, did you come back for another pair of those chamois lace-ups?
And so this is a more likely picture of the future. Same with the Brazil image of like the wrong person getting arrested, but the computer saying so. And the idea that we will be scanning irises in the future at a distance, not necessarily because governments are going to be trying to do it, but because the Gap is going to want to do it. It's the commercial imperative that shall drive this. And then we get to one of my favorites when it comes to the issue of identity. And this is from Gattaca in the early 1990s. That in a kind of Brave New World kind of way, imagined a world dictated by your genetic makeup. And that at some point in the future, we're going to stop having children through natural conception and natural childbirth, but instead we're going to genetically modify all of our kids to make sure that they aren't too short, that they don't have, to make sure they have good eyes and they can run fast and so on and so forth.
For the genetically superior, success is easier to attain, but it is by no means guaranteed. After all, there is no gene for fate. And when, for one reason or another, a member of the elite falls on hard times, their genetic identity becomes a valued commodity for the unscrupulous. One man's loss is another man's gain.
His credentials are impeccable. An expiration date you wouldn't believe.
The guy's practically gonna live forever. He's got an IQ off the register. Better than 20/20 in both eyes. The heart of an ox. He could run through a wall. If he can still run.
Jude Law.
Actually, he was a big-time swimming star.
And so the whole point of the movie is that you can't progress in this new society unless you too are genetically engineered. And if you haven't been genetically engineered, you have to try to adopt the identity of somebody who has been, and essentially steal their blood whenever you have to give blood tests in order to walk into a building, constant urine sampling to make sure you are who you claim to be, and you have to walk around with a bag of urine from that individual. And it starts getting into the idea that you can't have a hero unless the hero finds a way to avoid surveillance. And one of the best movies for capturing this, and perhaps the darkest dystopia, imagining a world where new immigrants to a society are forced into hard labor in order to earn their time in the glorious parts of society. We fall to the wonderful Toy Story 3.
Doesn't seem so bad.
It's not. Your real problem's the monkey. The monkey's the eye in the sky. He sees everything. Classrooms. Hallways. Even the playground. Unlock doors, sneak past guards, climb the wall. But if you don't take out that monkey, you ain't going nowhere. You want to get out of here? Get rid of that monkey. A little late for a stroll.
And this keeps on coming up in fiction. The idea that the surveillance is the thing that you must overcome, and that the hero must overcome the surveillance in order to be the hero. And from the Harry Potter books, you find out in the last book why you can't save Voldemort. Because if you save Voldemort, there's a spell out there that will identify you and where you are, and then you will be taken over by the baddies, essentially. And then similarly, there was a Bourne movie where the US government was listening to all global telecommunications from this building, actually, when it was The Guardian. And there was a Guardian journalist who said the name of a government program. And they were able to pinpoint him, and half an hour later he was shot dead at Waterloo Station. This was pre-Snowden, which is hilarious foreshadowing. But it's the death of fiction that comes from an all-seeing antagonist. Like, can you imagine how quickly Star Wars would have been over if we had birth registration records? Luke is the sister of Leia. The profession of the father is Dark Lord of the Sith. Obi-Wan Kenobi would have to register for an ID card on Tatooine that said religion was Jedi. You know, the fiction wouldn't occur if we had so many of the systems of surveillance that we have today. There's a reason why Toy Story doesn't take place in the United Kingdom. Because the toys can't be seen by humans. If they're seen by humans, they fall down. But with all the cameras and all the surveillance, you can't have that. It's the death of fiction. And then finally we get to 1984. So George Orwell really is the godfather of our movement. There's no doubt about it. But we don't dwell on the surveillance components of 1984 as much as we probably could. Because what I find more worrying about 1984 is what it did to language. And that's why it's relevant to this building.
You and I are dead. Every year fewer and fewer words, and the range of consciousness always a little smaller. Even now, of course, there's no reason or excuse for committing thought crime. It's merely a question of self-discipline, reality control, but in the end, there won't be any need even for that. The revolution will be complete when the language is perfect. By 2050, earlier probably, all real knowledge of old speak will have disappeared. The whole literature of the past will have been destroyed. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Byron, they'll exist only in Newspeak versions, not merely changed into something different, but changed into something contradictory of what they used to be. Even the literature of the party will change. Even the slogans will change. How could you have a slogan like "freedom is slavery" when the concept of freedom has been abolished? The whole climate of thought will be different. In fact, there will be no thought as we understand it now. Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness.
So the point is, you can control language, you can control the world. And the way they saw it, Orwell said, you can control the past, you can control the future. So to bring this all to a bit of a close, the modern world kind of sucks, and dystopias kind of help us to see where we're going. And one of my favorite modern dystopias is a book by Lionel Shriver from 2016 called The Mandibles, which imagines a family in about 15 years in America, where America goes through like an incredible, like an economic downturn that is like the Great Depression. And America essentially falls apart as a society as a result of that. And the only way they could rebuild was to essentially put chips in everybody's brains to monitor economic activity. And what's interesting about Lionel Shriver is that she wrote an article in 2016 when Trump got the nomination. And she said, she raised this idea of death of fiction again. She said, nobody would have believed a novel written that would talk about a Trump-like character becoming the nominee of the Republican Party, let alone, of course, president. And it's almost like we have to rely on science fiction and its absurdity to write about these types of things. Because if you wrote fiction along these lines, nobody would actually believe you or buy it. But I don't want to talk about politics to close this all off. What this keeps on coming back to, in my mind, is the question of humanity and what it is to be human and how dystopias allow us to reflect on that. And so we shouldn't see dystopias as warnings, but instead as an opportunity to look into ourselves and see what we find problematic. So, as I said, I don't focus on 1984 that much. That isn't the fear that drives me. One of the stories that drives me most is A Wrinkle in Time. Who's read A Wrinkle in Time? Madeleine L'Engle. It's a 1960s science fiction novel. Incredible science fiction novel. It was just made into a movie by Oprah last year. And in this movie, it's a bunch of kids that have to travel around from planet to planet to find their father. And one of the planets they land on is a planet called Chemamons. And this planet is run by a computer. And the computer is called IT. And it's run from a building called the Central Intelligence. And every day after school, the kids come out and they bounce balls all in unison. They go back in home all in unison. Everything in society is like clockwork. And essentially, it's a beautiful society. And eventually, they have a conversation with the machine, the brain that runs the society. And the brain says, people are happy. We've removed free will. And as a result, people are happy. And I love that fear and excitement you get about reading about that. It's like, well, yeah, it would be great if everything was so ordered, but that's terrible at the same time. And then one of my favorite final movies, I'm not going to play a clip, but you probably haven't seen this one. This is Pleasantville from the 1990s, which imagines two modern teenagers traveling back into a fictional, like Leave It to Beaver-like show, 1950s, perfect family, and it's a black and white, like they're in a black and white world, where everything is a 1950s America world. And these teenagers ruin it. Because they introduce sexuality, they introduce jealousy, they introduce poetry, literature, and all of a sudden the world falls apart. And again, I grew up watching Leave It to Beaver and 1950s shows. We all did, and and you see in modern society, what you see is this divide between people who want to look to the future and people who want to look to the past. And yet, what science fiction and dystopia allows us to admit to ourselves is that we're doing both all the time. We'll look at the perfect order of a world where you can predict crime and say, I want that world. But I also want art, and I also want poetry, and I also want religion, and I also want uncertainty. But I don't want murder, I don't want crime, but I do want uncertainty, and I do want freedom. And the author forces you to look inside and say, I'm the reason why the world's so screwed up. It's not because Tony Blair was building 1984. It's because we are so conflicted about the nature of autonomy, free will. And as technology keeps on coming to our lives, we're not asking that question about what is it doing to our humanity. And that, for me, is why dystopias are what I love to read, what I love to watch, because it shows to me that I'm conflicted. Thank you very much. Any questions, any thoughts? We have time for that, I believe we do. Also have alcohol out there, so I don't want to get in the way of any generation.
I want to touch my reflections on pretty much every one of those examples that you gave being men and also white men, and whether we should be seeing these as stories of male endeavour, male complexity, or whether they are indeed human stories.
Excellent question. So I've spent the past year chasing down science fiction written by women writers. And the most recent one I just finished last week was one called Autonomy, written by Annalie Newitz, who used to work at EFF. And it's very much about a world where gender is fluid, where the great concern is the pharmaceutical industry and patents, and how do you rebel against a world structured around power of corporations, so on and so forth. And I've also read another novel about robots that are subservient killing machines that become self-aware but decide they don't want to kill anymore. And so you actually have to search hard to find science fiction, unfortunately, written by women, but it's a stronger genre now. And Tor Press publish a lot of books by women science fiction novelists, so I definitely recommend that. But it's hard for me to reflect on your question without saying, yeah, of course, I agree. It's a problem, and it's male sexuality that's being rewarded. It's the male hero who is fighting against the system, and often the woman is either the subject who is there as a robot to be dominated, or she's the Eve of the story, leading into temptation and all of that. And so all of these images of the future are 1950s. It is 1950s being enforced all over again, and that's why I am seeking out the female novelist to see what are those perspectives, how is the storytelling different? I'll stop there.
Just to follow up on that, there is a Chinese novel by a writer called Chan Kung Chan. I don't know if you've come across it.
What's the name of the novel?
I can't remember the name of the novel. The writer is Chan Kung Chan, who spends time between Beijing and Hong Kong. And the story is that it's a society where everybody's happy, except for a few, the resistance. And the reason that they're not happy is that there's a missing month in everybody's calendar, and nobody knows what happened in that month, except for the people who remember that who know that there's a missing month. And it's about totalitarian societies for obvious reasons, but I just wondered if that were kind of, it's about that trope of, total control and resistance, which has come out of another culture.
Absolutely.
So you might want that one for your list.
Totally, and I've also been reading Chinese science fiction. So there was the Three-Body Problem that came out about 2 years ago, and there's another short series by J.Y. Yang about a world where you select your gender when you're around 17 or 18. and what it is like to be in a world like that, where there's also magic and there's the force, and there's all, yeah, it's just surreal in a wonderful way. So yeah, Chinese fiction is fascinating as well. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not seeing the back too well. If you're raising your hands, I'm sorry.
Thank you for your really wonderful talk. You talked a lot about people being happy and being kind of dull to what's really going on in the world. But another theme in 1984 was the 10-minute hate. And, you know, you just have to go on social media and everyone's mad about something, and then there's a backlash, and then there's a backlash against the backlash, and then everyone forgets about it. And I just wondered if you could comment on that a little, please.
Yeah, no, that resonates with me so much more, again, than the surveillance aspect. It is that for a moment, we all say, that is the bad person over there. We shall be outraged by what that person did. And then we'll kind of forget it, which didn't necessarily happen in 1984, because there was only just 2 people we were always angry at. But I am very worried about why is it we're angry at something? Why is it we've decided that something over here is the thing that we should be angry at? Like, do we, and I'm going to pick controversial examples just to be a bit of an ass, but like, do we actually know the policies of the new leader of Brazil? We don't. We hear rumors about how terrible he may be, but we haven't looked. But if you ask anybody, oh, have you heard the news about Brazil? He sounds like such a terrible human being. Like another Trump-like character. And yet, so why do I know that, but I don't know anything about the mayor of Birmingham? Actually, I do, and I don't like him. But still, you know, like, why is it we know the things that we know? And why is it that the things that we know we need to have an opinion on, and that opinion must be strong, and must be hate or love. There's no room for this grayness. That is the modern world that we have right now, and that is very 1984 at the 2 minutes of hate. I totally agree.
Hi. So you were talking towards the end around how your question is always like, there are 2 aspects of dystopian societies inside of you. I really like that, and I really relate to it. I work for a major credit scoring company. I always face that problem of, but what is it you can rebel against, I guess? And I guess my question to you is, how much do you think, a lot of it is inside of us, and we can't even become aware of that. However, how much of it is, you think, you know, where is the scope towards what I can push to change? I used to be subscribed to ACLU, and I caught myself thinking when you're talking about it, that I unsubscribed because of the negativity I was getting. I was forcing myself to just kind of, I know this stuff is happening. I know I need to be aware, but what can I do about it? I guess I'd like your thoughts about that. What do you do as an individual who can't change that much?
Yeah, so I love that question because for the past year we've spent at PI, we've been doing strategic planning, where we're asking ourselves, okay, yes, the world's on fire. What are we going to do about it? And one of the questions we're asking ourselves, exactly yours, is like, do we paint the world in a way that people will find compelling because it's so negative and it's so dark, and they will hopefully come behind us and we'll march in unison together to take down that world, and we're the heroes of that dystopian novel? Or do we want to be the voice in the wilderness and say, there can be a happy ending to all of this, that the world isn't that bad because there's this thing called autonomy and freedom, and we can never quench that, we can never put it out, because as it was in the Matrix, every time they designed a world of control where there was no autonomy, the world would blow up. It just wouldn't work. The machines were tearing their hair out, saying, how do we design a world where we keep these humans happy and they don't destroy it? And the answer was, give them autonomy, give them some free will, and then they'll be happy, and then things will be fine. I don't know what I'm talking myself into, like, just give us a little bit of freedom and we'll be fine with it. But it is about the divergence of, like, paint the world as terrible, we're heading to a dystopian future. And that's why I'm saying don't take it too literally. Don't go around saying this is 1984, because it's not optimistic. It doesn't make people feel empowered, but also these stories are more about you, for you to decide what you're comfortable with and what you're not. And as somebody who's been working in civil liberties for like 24 odd years, there are times I start to get full of despair. I start to get tired. I start to think, I can't do this anymore. Can I just go and do something else? But then I watch an old movie or I read an old book, and I remember, I don't imagine, oh, I'm going to fight that 1984, I'm going to fight that Matrix. I just remember what it makes me feel, and that uncertainty and that unhappiness, and I want to do something about it. I don't know what, but I want to do something about it, and that's how I go to work every day. So it's about the inner drive, and I don't have an answer to you about how you fix your inner drive. I'm just saying, feed it. Feed it with this fiction and dystopian, and then ask yourself, what do you want to build as opposed to what the NGOs are trying to sell you along the way, including ours. Somebody at the back?
Yeah, that was great, thank you. As you reflect on at the end, the dystopias sort of encourage us to reflect on what it means to be human.